put a class together for CAR. He brought me in and started bringing me to different meetings that he was going to and setting up these speaking engagements. And now we teach one class together. It's a 3-day class. And then I take it from there and have sort of taken the solar on because it seems to be a pain point for a lot of people.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And welcome everybody, Dustin Harris hanging out with you once again. Got a great guest coming up. Want to pause here first and remind you that we are sponsored by Alamode. Alamode, of course, is the software that I've been using for over 20 years. To do my appraisal work, you should be as well. Check them out. Go to alamode.com. You can pick up the phone and call them at 800-ALAMODE. We, of course, are sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster helps to save 30 to 60 minutes per report, folks. Check them out. Go to datamasterusa.com. One more time, datamasterusa.com. And finally, we are sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP is the E&O that I use. There's a reason I use it. I can't wait to tell you about an experience I had just over the weekend with OREP and part of their benefits. So stay tuned for that. You can start looking at OREP while you're listening to the podcast. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. Well, folks, I want to welcome back to the program a good friend of mine and a great appraiser out of Southern California. His name is Mark Buhler. Mark, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Dustin. Thanks for having me.
Really good to have you once again. We had you on episode number 365. We should be able to remember that number. Number 365, Appraiser Responsibility with regard to green energy and solar. Let me just go through your bio here real quick in case people aren't familiar with Mark. He is a state licensed certified residential appraiser. His company's name is CMP Appraisals. He's had over 25 years of experience in the Southern California area. He specializes in private appraisals for legal, IRS, and personal use, such as tax planning, estates, and divorces. And he teaches classes on green energy and solar. And you've kind of ramped that up recently, Mark. You do quite a bit of teaching and traveling lately. How's that been going?
Oh, it's been fun. It's been a good time. And yeah, I'm trying to get out there and share what I know about solar and green building and valuation.
We talked a little bit about this on episode 365, but just a quick, brief recap. What kind of spearheaded that? How did you get into green energy and specializing in that, especially for teaching?
Well, the Reader's Digest version is I met the education director for California Association of Realtors. She paired me up with a guy who's very well respected in the green field on the realtor and contractor side. We put a class together for CAR. He brought me in and started bringing me to different meetings that he was going to and setting up these speaking engagements. And now we teach one class together. It's a 3-day class. And then I take it from there and have sort of taken the solar on because it seems to be a pain point for a lot of people.
Now, are you teaching specifically just to appraisers, or do you talk to real estate agents and loan officers, or kind of what's your specialty there, Mark?
At this point, it's mostly been appraisers for continuing education, but I do speak to realtors. They're a little tougher target. They're not feeling the pain quite as much yet, but they're definitely interested. Okay.
Yeah. And if the listeners have not listened to episode 365, again, it's called Appraiser Responsibilities with regard to green energy and solar. And that's when Mark and I really dove into this solar thing. And we're not going to talk about, a lot of the specifics that can be found in that episode for obvious reasons. People can go back and listen to that. What I would like to do today, Mark, is kind of, the title is going to be Questions About Appraising with Solar, because there are a lot of questions. And even after having you on the program, and, I'm pretty thick-headed. You've probably learned that over the years, Mark. It takes quite a bit to learn me on things. But I've had a lot of things happen in the last little while, and I know you've experienced this as well with some of your appraiser friends across the country when questions come up with regard to solar. Do you get bombarded with those kind of questions on a regular basis, Mark, or just dummies like me?
The more that I am out there teaching, the more, people will reach out to me, and I get questions, quite often from students, and I encourage that. I'm here to help and be a resource to my fellow appraisers.
Well, I appreciate that, and you have been to me in several ways. And I know it probably gets frustrating on your side because you give me some advice, and then I'm not one to accept it willy nilly. I'll push back. So, and it's not that I don't believe or agree with you. It's that I'm a skeptic at heart. So I'll push. But just briefly, I'm not going to go into the details. I'll give the Reader's Digest version as well. I recently had an experience with solar. This was a situation where, just in brief, I showed up. First question I asked, is it leased or owned? She very clearly told me that it was leased, that they barely got it. They just barely got the loan on it. I always, honestly, Mark, I have to admit, when there's solar on the property, I kind of just go, oh no, please be leased, please be leased. And when it is, I'm like, whew, okay, great, it's leased. Well, then I had a lender push back big time. So before I get into the pushback, let's start there. Appraiser shows up to the property, questions asked, leased or owned, answers leased, off the hook?
Maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
A lot of homeowners don't really know what they have, what type of ownership they have. So you need to ask more questions.
Okay, let's talk that then. Let's say, hypothetically, I was smart enough to ask additional questions. What should I have asked in that situation?
Who did you lease it from? How much is your lease payment?
Okay.
What's the term on it? A lot of homeowners would say, I own the solar. And you'd be like, darn, now I have to do work and figure out what it's worth. Next question, how much did you pay for it? When they say nothing, they don't own it. They're not clear. So homeowners need to know what they have. There's a lot of misinformation, misperception, and a lot of people just need to understand what's going on. So if it's leased, great. Power purchase agreement, better. We don't have to do anything with it. But you and I went back and forth on one of your situations because you're getting into a little bit of solar stickiness lately. And it was owned with a UCC1 filing. Now, that is another one that you don't have to give any value to. But, it's digging through a lot of information and asking a lot of questions.
Now, obviously, I don't want you to teach your whole class here on the podcast. I certainly want appraisers to take it, but let's dig into this just a little bit because most listeners are not going to be familiar with this term UCC1.
The universal UCC1 is a personal property lien that's filed on the personal property, on the solar that's on the roof. So we're not to give value to personal property. Next question I get is, where in the heck do I find that thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the UCC1 file?
Because I would assume most homeowners would shrug and say, I don't know what that is either.
Most people do. I did too when I first heard it. But there's owned with a solar loan, no UCC1 file. We're to give value to that, even if it has a solar loan. Owned with a solar loan and a UCC1 filing, we are not to give value to that because the solar loan company has placed a lien on the property, the personal property, which is the solar panels. Okay. And they can come and take them off the roof at any point.
Okay. So, and we're going to talk more after the break about value, but you say you're to give value to that. There may not be value there, but what you're saying is you should at least consider, whether there should be or should not be an adjustment for value, right?
Right. The only time we're not obligated to give value is when they technically don't own it, when it's leased, power purchase agreement, or owned with that lien on it.
Okay. And if they have that UCC1, just to reemphasize, because I think this, and I know I did this at first, and it took you several times telling me, no, Dustin, you got it backward. If they have a UCC1 on it, that means it is personal property. We don't even have to consider value at that point. If they don't have a UCC1, at that point, we can consider whether or not it's valuable, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So in this situation, let me just further dive into this experience that I had. In this situation, I don't remember if there was a UCC one or not, but it was pretty confirmed that this was personal property. This was not real property. And when I informed the lender then asked me to appraise the property with a hypothetical as if the solar was paid off and it was real property. Is there anything wrong with that request from the lender, Mark?
No, I don't think so. I've seen that happen before, and that's one way out of it. My feedback to that typically is the time of inspection, it was owned with a loan or it was a lease. So at the time of inspection, it was what we call TPO, third party owned.
Okay.
The homeowner did not own that.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point in time, I'm not going to give it any value. If you really want to press on me, then yes, I guess I have to make the extraordinary assumption or hypothetical condition that yes, it is paid for. And I think that happens in purchases when they're going to pay that off in the process.
Mm-hmm.
That might be one case where it happens.
Yeah, I kind of gathered that. They didn't give me all the details, but I kind of gathered that they were trying to wrap that solar into the new refinance. And that's probably why they wanted to, to see if there was value there. Well, let's just say it straight. They wanted value there, whether it was there or not, because I got pushed back, later on, and we're going to talk more about value as we get back from the sponsors. But anything else that appraisers need to know going into? So an appraiser walks up to the property. I just want to reiterate a couple things. They walk up to the property. Solar's clearly on the roof. They go through the property, and part of the conversation, the interview that they have with the homeowner, what questions should an appraiser be asking?
Well, let's go before we roll up in front of the house and see the solar on the roof. When we call them for the appointment, let's ask them. Let's ask them.
Good.
Is this your address? Yes. Is all the standard questions. Have you done any additions? Is there any upgrades? Do you have solar on your roof? Yes. Oh, yes, you do. Is it owned or leased? It's owned. Ah, darn it. Okay, well.
Don't say that out loud, though, right?
How big is your array? How big is your system? And how old is it? And with those little bits of detail right there, now we can sit at our desk before we get there and try and see if we can't find something to use as a comp.
Okay. So we need to determine whether or not it's owned or not, whether it's personal property or not. And that really is the difference. It's not so much how it's attached like we would with most things. In other words, let's take a refrigerator, for example. I don't count a refrigerator and look at value for a refrigerator unless it's a built-in system, which is typically not until I get to the high-end homes and you've got like a Sub-Zero built into the cabinetry. But with solar, it's not so much of whether or not it's attached to the roof. That doesn't determine whether or not it's real property or not. It's the owned or unowned situation, correct?
Correct. The method of attachment is going to, by default, will be considered real estate because it is permanently attached.
Yeah, it's screwed in. Yeah.
Screwed to be permanently attached.
Right. Okay.
It's more of the ownership, like a fee simple versus leasehold type of an ownership.
Gotcha.
When we're talking about owning it, leasing it, or a power purchase agreement.
Okay. We're talking with Mark Buhler. He is an expert on green energy out of California, and we're talking specifically about solar and some of the experiences that I've had, and I know appraisers have had across the country with solar. He teaches a great solar class that we'll talk more about at the end of the show here, and allow Mark to do a little shout out on upcoming classes that he's got. But I want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored by three great companies. One of them, of course, is a la mode. A la mode is the company that I've been utilizing for years and years and years. Boy, they've been in business, folks, for, catch this, over 3 decades, helping appraisers to do more. Helping them to be more efficient, to give them the tools that they need. One of the great things about a la mode, in fact, there was a question asked on a forum over the weekend as to, is there any other system out there for mobile that would be better than a la mode? And every answer that came back on this appraisers forum from appraisers across the nation was stick with a la mode. A la mode has the tools. They've been in this business for a long time to help appraisers to do more with less. I know that has been my experience as well. Check them out. Go to alamode.com for more information, or you can pick up the phone and call one of their friendly sales people at 800-ALA-MODE. I've been in connection with Rick Liffrith over the last couple of weeks. He's been helping me out with the situation here locally. This is a great guy. He is the CEO, the founder of DataMaster. And in fact, he and his team did a great webinar for a local group here in the last little while, and it just blew me away how much Rick loves appraising, loves appraisers and loves helping them to do what they need to be doing. Saving 30 to 60 minutes per report. That's what DataMaster will do for you folks. Check them out. Go to datamasterusa.com. One more time, it's datamasterusa.com. Finally, we are sponsored by OREP. Folks had a great experience over the weekend. This happens on a regular basis, actually. It's easy to look at that and go, oh, an email from my E&O. Gee, do I really want to read that? Yes, you do. As I started reading through that, I realized that OREP is offering free, that's right, FREE, free continuing education for its members. I looked at it. I looked at the states that I appraise in currently, that I have licenses in, and this is regular CE, folks. 14 hours of CE that was approved in all 3 states, and I took one of the classes over the weekend. It was a great program. It was a great setup. It was a very good system. I was able to cruise through that and get my 7 hours, and I've got another one coming up. Absolutely free because I am a member of OREP. Folks, these are the types of benefits that you will see if you're a member of the OREP team. It's orep.org for more information. One more time, it's orep.org. All right, folks, we are back. We're talking with Mark Buhler out of Southern California, and Mark is a teacher of solar, and he travels the country really and teaches appraisers about solar. And Mark, this solar stuff is not going away, is it?
No, I think it might be here to stay. Yeah. Definitely in California, it is.
I'm seeing a lot pop up. Isn't there some type of a law? I'm not real familiar with California, but isn't there something going on in California where all residential houses have to eventually get solar or something similar?
Yes, California has a new policy. It's zero net energy is required on all new construction, residential beginning in 2020 and commercial beginning in 2030.
Gotcha. What about established homes? Is that not the case for established?
No.
Okay.
No, but the state has a goal of going 100% renewable energy by 2045.
Okay.
Which is going to involve some retrofitting of state buildings and such.
So, Mark, you were on the program, episode 365, where we talked about solar and some of these details. Today, we spent the first half talking about whether or not these systems are leased or owned. And the purpose of that, from an appraiser's perspective, is, whether they are real property or personal property. And we all know that personal property, we don't have to look at value on. Real property, now we've got, let's say, Mark, hypothetically, we get into the situation where it is real property. It is considered real estate. It's permanently attached. It's owned by the homeowner. Now we have to start looking at value. Okay, so let's talk about value for solar. How does an appraiser find value or discover value or decide whether or not there is value for solar?
Yes, I mean, first we need to look at market acceptance in our area, and I've found by reaching out into other areas and corresponding with people across the country, there's not acceptance in all areas. Okay. It's become clear to me because I thought everything was like here, where it's everybody loves it and it's all over the place. And so yeah, we have to determine that first.
So let's start with that, Mark. In your area, your geographic area that you appraise in general, and I know that obviously it might vary from house to house, but in general, you've got solar, you own it. That's gonna affect value. In other words, there's going to be value in Southern California for solar for the most part.
Yes.
Okay. So in my situation, let me tell you, just to tell the listener, I know you're familiar with the situation, Mark, but because you and I went back and forth on this particular situation that we talked about before the break. But let's lay it out there for the listeners. I was asked to do a hypothetical appraisal as if the solar was paid off in real property. As I started digging into it, and my approach has always been, sure, there's 3 approaches to value. There's the cost approach, there's the income approach. But let's face it, Mark, I mean, 99.9% of the time, I'm going to put my eggs in the sales comparison approach. And as I looked at sales comparison properties, those that had solar, those that did not, and I was very careful to make sure that the comparables, the sales rather, that I was polling were truly owned systems. If I didn't know, I called the agent Sometimes, honestly, Mark, they didn't know. And so I had to dig a little bit deeper, or I had to reject that sale and say, well, we can't tell whether it's owned or not. But in the situation, I was able to find, I think, 6 paired sales. They weren't paired to my subject, but they were paired to each other. In other words, I would find 2 homes. One of them have solar, one very similar home did not have solar. In every case, other than one, I think I found about a 3% adjustment on one. In every case, there was no market proof, or I hate that word. There was no market support for solar in my area. And that's with the sales comparison. So where do I go from there?
Well, you did a great job of supporting a 0 adjustment right there. And that's what I would, encourage those of us that rely mostly on the sales comparison approach and the paired and group analysis. You're not going to find one in your market that's the same square footage sold in the last 6 months within a mile. You're not. So what you did was perfectly, acceptable and right. Go out and see if you can extract an adjustment from that. A lot of people don't have anything. They can't find anything. The MLS isn't very robust. It's not well reported in there. So I encourage people to go to the income and cost approaches. And so does the Fannie, Freddie, and FHA selling guides. They say if there's insufficient data to perform a match paired analysis, the appraiser must analyze and report one of the approaches below to calculate an adjustment. They go into the cost approach and the income approach.
Okay.
That's where I meet a lot of resistance.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because I see that on the forums as well. In fact, just recently there was a thread. I know you were involved in it. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was an appraiser that jumped on there and basically said, I'm being told that I need to look at the cost and income approaches, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm being told that I need to look at the cost and income approaches for solar. But hey, I've always been taught that the sales comparison approach is the best approach, and why should I then, if I'm not going to appraise any of the rest of the components of the house by the cost and income approaches, how can I justify doing that with solar? What would you say to somebody like that?
Well, I get that argument, but some appraisers do appraise to the cost. Think about how commercial guys do their jobs.
Right, exactly.
If we were to consider the amount of energy savings on the bill as income, you could definitely come up with a way of empirically proving an adjustment.
Okay.
Now, if there's no data in the market, I sometimes put that on the realtors, and I know how many appraisers feel about realtors, but if they don't understand how to sell it for more, then there's nothing there for us to extract out. So that's a target of us greenie people out here, is to get to the realtors and say, if you expect to get value out of this, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate value to your sellers and buyers.
Mm-hmm. And how do they do that typically?
Well, they're going to have to become knowledgeable and educated on the value of it.
Okay.
If you had 2 exact homes and one didn't have an electric bill and one did, as a realtor, I think you should be able to demonstrate a little bit more value in the one that doesn't have an electric bill. Right.
Okay. But if you've got an outstanding lease on this, it goes back to what we talked about before the break. If you've got an outstanding lease on that, that also has to be considered as well. Yeah, sure, you're saving on your energy bills, but if you buy this house, it also comes with 13 years of a 15-year lease not paid off, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of issues that come up on the marketability for realtors on leases and liens and such. And typically what happens is those get paid off, Okay. At this point, people aren't out there going, I got to find a house with solar on it, and I'm going to do everything I can to find one. They'll find a house they like and go, oh, wow, it has solar on the roof. I guess I'll take that.
Exactly.
But I'm not paying any extra.
Right. In other words, they're sold on everything else, and as an aside, there happens to be solar on the roof.
They're not searching for a house with solar. Right.
Exactly. Okay. So let's talk. Let's go back to these 3 approaches just briefly again. Just make sure I'm clear, because I think this was confusion from my side, not yours, Mark. You were very clear. Again, I'm very hard-headed. Your response to me and your response here would be that if you can find support, or, as we talked about off the air, no support for value with the sales comparison approach, that's going to trump your cost or income approaches, because that's the approach we're using for all other aspects, all other value anyway. What you're saying is go to the cost or income approach, specifically the income approach, if there is no support one way or the other, and I want to make sure I emphasize that, one way or the other, whether or not there's value or not value in the market, then you can look at the income approach. But if the approach that I took clearly shows there's no support from the sales comparison approach. No need to go to the cost to income approach, right?
No, wrong.
Okay.
I would say we are to measure the market reaction to the amenity.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can't find it in the sales comparison approach, maybe we can find it somewhere else. People are buying these properties. The number of installations nationwide is going up. Look at your area. Are you seeing more or less of them? Mm-hmm. When we spoke in September on episode 365, you told me, I got to be honest with you, it's not an issue out here.
Right.
Since then, it's become one.
It has been. Yep, you're right.
So, with the cost and income approach, in order of reliability, my experience has been, I go income first, market if I can find it, and then cost, because everybody pays different prices for different things.
Sure.
Currently, we have a 30% tax credit, which is going away in a couple of years. There's incentive to buy. As utilities raise their prices, there's incentive to buy. So what I'm finding when there's no market reaction, it's usually because the return on investment doesn't make sense in low cost energy states.
Okay.
I would say, we're all going to go to the market approach first. We're going to try and find those sales. We're not going to find them for whatever reason. Bad reporting in the MLS. People with solar typically don't slap it on their roof and sell their house. They're in it for the long haul.
Right, exactly.
There's another reason maybe why we're not seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Fannie, Freddie, and FHA handbooks and guides are telling us, if you can't find it in the market, look to the other approaches.
Let me. I know I'm going to get this question from a listener. So if far be it from me for not asking it. And I love you, Mark. But I know I'm going to get the question, so I'm going to push back a little bit and play the devil's advocate, if you will. Not that my listeners are devils and I'm advocating for them, but I know I'm going to get these questions. So I'm just going to ask it. And here's the question. So Mark, are you telling me that I can go to paired sales analysis? I got 6 paired sales. They all show there's no value there in this market. Then I'm supposed to look at the income approach and say, well, they're saving on their energy bill, so I'm going to give them some credit for that.
Well, we reconcile all 3 approaches to value and see which one you rely on most heavily. That's what I teach in my class. Here's one way to look at it from a sales comparison standpoint. Here's the cost standpoint. Here's a couple different ways of looking at it from the income approach. Report, reconcile to a number. If you don't think the income approach has as much credibility as the sales comparison approach, go with the sales comparison. You've explained it. You've supported a zero adjustment.
And this is where the appraiser and his or her opinions and whether or not there's support for that come in. In other words, this is why we don't use AVMs, right?
Right. But one caveat to that last comment. Mm-hmm. Think about the homeowner that just dropped thousands of dollars on these panels.
Oh, yeah.
Think about who sends in the complaints to the state. So that's where you're going to get pushback. I was surprised to hear that you were getting it from the lender, but that probably came straight from the borrower to the lender to you.
Yeah, maybe. I kind of deciphered and read between the lines as we talked about before the break. I think that the whole purpose of this particular lender, because I had about 3 right in succinct succession to one another in about 3 weeks' time from this particular lender, they were all solar. I think they were targeting solar owners and trying to wrap their solar lease into a loan is what they were doing. And so I was getting pushback from the lender because they're trying to make this work. And by the way, as an aside, and I think this is something that appraisers have to deal with here, I have not received one order since I gave no value to that solar since then. So there you go. I
always wonder when I get a house with solar on it, is it because, he knows about solar, but I just think it's completely random.
Could be. All right, my friend. So appraisers, let's just face it, most appraisers, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I will head up this committee. We're pretty incompetent when it comes to solar. How do we become more competent?
Well, there's a few different ways. I mentioned it on the last time that we spoke. Obviously you can go to class, you can go to online class and in-person class. But if you look at the Valuation Advisory 7 for residential and Valuation Advisory number 9 from the Appraisal Foundation, it spells out a lot of these different approaches and different ways of, trying to figure this puzzle out. And those are really good. There's the Appraisal Institute Green and Energy Efficient Addendum for residential and commercial. Take a look at that. In addition to that, take some classes. There's a lot of good stuff online. I've done a lot of self-study myself. And I've got classes that I'm doing in California, Arizona. I've got it approved in Nevada just recently, in Colorado. So I'm going to be heading your way, people.
Love it. Love it. So
that's strictly on solar. That's strictly solar, because that's the pain point for a lot of us.
Absolutely. Is there a website that people can watch, or a mailing list they can get signed up for to be made aware of when the upcoming classes are?
I'm putting together a website right now. It's in the final stages. It's called appraisesolar.com.
Perfect. And this will not air for a couple of weeks, so hopefully that'll be put together. Give it to us one more time.
www.appraisesolar.com.
Love it. Mark, thank you for joining us once again. Thank you for helping to explain and understand where we're coming from here with solar. That's Mark Buhler out of Southern California. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Dustin.
Always. And as things come up in the future, please let us know. Folks, I hope that this has been helpful. But I'll tell you, I am looking at the possibility, hopefully coinciding my schedule to be with Mark's, to be able to be a part of his class upcoming. I know that I need to know more. It's not going away, as he mentioned. It's getting bigger, and there's a lot of questions out there from appraisers, and I think it's important that we get educated on what solar is and how it affects our local markets. Thank you for joining us today, folks, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
All right, editor, we're about 9 minutes into the recording. Talking with Mark Buhler on solar, specifically questions about appraising with solar in 3. Better blow my nose. Hold on a sec. All right, let's make it work. Thanks. Thank you. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1.